Hey everyone, this is my review of the Husqvarna 562 XP chainsaw. Some basic stats on the saw. It's a 59.8 cc engine, so it's basically a 60 cc engine. It makes 4.7 horsepower and it weighs 13.4 pounds. This is a professional grade chainsaw, so it does offer quite a few bar sizes and it is pretty lightweight, especially for the power to weight ratio. Husqvarna recommends a maximum of a 28-inch bar on this. They offer an 18, a 20, a 24, and a 28-inch bar, as well as all bars are available in either a 050 or a 058 width. Professional grade saw, it is fairly expensive, but it does have a lot of really nice features on it. Most notably is the magnesium crankcase. You can see here, this is magnesium, so it's fairly lightweight and strong. The starter cover is its own piece, so it's easy to change out in the field. You can use the tool it comes with to just swap it out should you break the pull start. On the bottom, you have the manual adjustment for the oiling system, counterclockwise to turn it up, clockwise to turn it down. Husqvarna recommends if you're running a 24-inch bar or bigger, you have it set to the maximum oiling capacity. This is a newer, updated model. I'll talk a little bit about some of the updates on it in a minute. With this, you have these covers for both the bar oil and the fuel tank. They're spring-loaded with these retainers that pop out, so it's easy to loosen them, especially if they get really tight. You don't need a tool to do it. You have a sight window here for your fuel, primer bulb, a compression release, and then on the front of the machine, you have a momentary rocker to turn it off, pull it out, and then up for maximum for the choke, and then one click down for run. Whenever you put the choke on, even if you turn it off like that, it goes automatically into a high idle, so you have to click the throttle, and that will turn the high idle off. You have an inertia brake on it, and you have a nice aluminum handle. This machine itself, one of the nicest features about this machine is it sits on vibration dampener. So you have 3 springs, one here, and then one on the bottom. You can see the engine itself will move independently of the frame. So that really helps with your hand numbness or operator fatigue. So this thing can move around on its own and you really feel very, very little vibrations from it compared to a solid mounted saw. On the other side, this cover, these bar nuts, they have retainers on them, so if you're changing this out in the field, you do not have to worry about losing the bar nuts. They will stay on, they will not come off at all. And then on the front here, you have the tensioner for the chain adjustment. So everything's a fairly common layout for a chainsaw, but this is fairly lightweight and it has a relatively narrow profile, especially for a professional grade saw. I'll pop the cover off and I'll just show you some of the features underneath. All you need is the scrunch that it comes with. It's got 3 retaining clips that hold it on. This cover does not come off, by the way. That's just for aesthetics. So if you need to change the spark plug, you have to take this cover off. That will not do anything. All right, with the cover off, what's different about this saw is the cylinder sits at a 45-degree angle. Most saws more commonly were 90. The reason that they did this was because Husqvarna believes that as the closer you can get the cylinder to being horizontal, the better the performance would be. They didn't want to go with 0 degree because then cooling becomes an issue. So this was the compromise. They decided to go with 45 degrees instead of 90 degrees for better performance, but still have the saw able to properly cool itself. Spark plug's easily accessible on the top. You have one clip that retains your air filter, so this is all easy to change out in the field. And then you can see the wiring down here for the auto-tune system. That's really the only thing you can't really adjust in the field is the auto-tune system because it does need a computer. I did mention before that this is the updated model. By that I mean this saw has been out for probably about 5 to 6 years now, give or take. There were some complaints and issues when this came out. This saw has the auto-tune system on it. The auto-tune system basically means that there's a microprocessor on the carburetor itself, so it will automatically adjust as opposed to having to manually adjust the carburetor jets like you would on an older saw. Some people thought that the system was really finicky. They didn't like it. Once the saw breaks in, it seems to be good. I think they've kind of worked the bugs out of the system, and it works fairly well. So I noticed it was a little hesitant when I first got it, but once it broke in, it seemed to be okay. And then sometimes when I start it and it's cold outside, the auto-tune system takes a couple seconds just to kind of figure out where it needs to be. Within usually a couple of seconds, it will bog down, and then it'll find its place almost immediately, and then it'll work correctly. So I think it seems to work pretty well. You just need those few seconds for it to kind of learn where it needs to be. The other main complaint this thing was getting was a hot start issue. Once the saw got really hot and you turned it off and went to restart it, guys were having a really hard time getting this thing to restart again. What they did to combat this was they put this little cutout on the side here, this vent, to help combat it. So you can see it lines up nicely with the cylinder. So I think that all these issues are resolved. I've started this thing hot a whole bunch of times. I've never had a problem starting this thing when it's hot. So I think that they pretty much worked all the bugs out of the system, and this seems to work a lot better. Now, most of these complaints I've seen were like probably 2 to 3 years old. I'm not really hearing too many new complaints about them. A lot of the local guys use these. Some of the tree removal guys use these. I talked to quite a few people before I bought this thing, and they're not really having any issues. And these are guys that are using this thing relentlessly day in and day out. Really are having no issues. So I think it's a really good saw now. They've worked all the bugs out of the system. So the biggest question is the pros and cons. Like I said, the pros are that it's a really good power to weight ratio. I think it's a relatively small saw, especially considering how big of a bar that they offer for something like this. You can get a pretty big bar on this thing, and it's not overly cumbersome. It's not overly heavy. It's still really nice and light and maneuverable at that point. So that I think is the biggest pro about this thing. As far as cons, the only real con I've had with this thing is it's expensive. I mean, you're going to pay between $700 and $800 for the saw, depending on what bar size you go with, but you get what you pay for. So I'm not really having any issue with this thing. It seems to run really good. The only recommendation that I've seen by everybody is they said just with the auto-tune system, make sure that everything is taken care of as far as make sure the chain is sharp, make sure it has fresh, good quality, premium fuel in it that's correctly blended, and make sure it's got a nice clean air filter on it that's not overly dirty. So as long as everything is where it needs to be, the saws, everybody says now they run really good and they really don't have any issues. The auto-tune system keeps it in check and keeps it running well. I think this saw is best suited for someone who's going to be using this thing a lot. I'm using this primarily, I bought it initially to do some land clearing around my house, and I'm also going to be using this primarily now for cutting firewood. I'll be cutting up large tree trunks with this thing, so I'll be cutting fairly large diameter pieces of wood. I think that's best who this is suited for. Professional loggers, people who are using this a lot, tree removal experts, anybody like that is going to be using the saw quite a bit or is cutting relatively large pieces of wood. I think this is not for somebody who is not well versed in using chainsaws. This thing is a very powerful saw and it offers a lot of big bar sizes. So if you're using it casually, it's kind of expensive for somebody who's using a saw casually. And it is a pretty big machine if you get the larger bars on it. So if you're not really using the saw this much, it's just overkill for somebody like that. So you might want to look at something a little bit smaller and not quite as expensive. But if you're looking for good performance, relatively lightweight, and a lot of variable bar sizes you can run safely on this machine under their recommendations, go with a saw like this. I really like this thing, and I've had a lot of really good luck with it, and it's been a really great saw. And it's as long as I keep the chain sharp, it's cut everything I've thrown in front of it with no problem. So hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching.